comes to fitness, everyone pretty well knows how to be fit. You just eat right and exercise. Diet and exercise. That's the standard answer. When it comes to finance, I think fundamentally everyone knows how to do well with their finances. Just spend less than you make. But just like in fitness, just because everyone knows how to do it, we still have lots of people that are not fit. Most of us are not fit or not as fit as we want to be.
Yeah, I think
right?
That's the key.
Yeah, and so the same is true for finances. Even though a lot of people fundamentally know, I need to spend less than I make, or I need to diet and exercise, for example, we still don't do those things. So the question becomes why? Why is it that some people are successful in becoming fit and some people are successful in their finances? And I think the underlying reason is because they have a reason. They have a why. They have a motivation behind the know-how.
Yeah.
And so what we want to share with you is our why. Our whys, plural, for why we manage our money the way that we do. Why
it's worth it.
Yeah, why we think it's worth it. It does take effort. It takes time to manage your money well. It takes intentionality, but it's worth it. Just like diet and exercise is worth it. So some background on us. We are both Ramsey personal financial coaches. We are both CPAs. However, we didn't start out that way. We both started out as clueless kids, that didn't know anything, just like everybody. We were blessed to have parents that taught us the value of money.
Yeah.
Taught us how to work for money.
Let's just say there was no minimum wage in the Struble house.
Yeah. Did a lot of weird jobs for your parents for less than minimum wage, I'm sure.
I wouldn't say weird, maybe.
Well, like picking up rocks, right?
Yeah. We picked up oranges.
Picked up oranges, yeah. I knew you talked about that before.
There's 3 cents for every orange.
And my parents gave me, a small allowance as I was growing up, and that taught me limited resources because, I only had so much money to spend, and it taught me opportunity cost because, with limited resources, you have to choose. Am I going to buy this or that? Because I don't have enough to buy everything.
Yeah.
So I'd have to pick between, toys or candy. You can't have both. Or whatever the case may be, because I only had so much money.
Yeah. My dad introduced taxes at one point. So when we were really, really young, we would each get $1 to go to the 99-cent store. And we could pick out any one thing, and it was great. And then at a certain age, we started having to have we needed more than $1. And so we would have to earn the extra to cover the tax.
To pay for the tax, yeah. So initially he said, I will just buy you one item, but then later you had to learn, okay.
It actually costs more than
$1.
So he staged it up.
And that's how it should be. We all learn in steps. And so that's great. That's a good way to teach. But what we want to talk today about is, when we were kids, we didn't just learn the how-to, but our parents were good about either explicitly or implicitly teaching us the why, the motivation. And so the good news is you don't have to be a CPA. You don't have to be super smart. You don't have to be super rich to be good with the money that you do have. But you do have to be intentional.
Yeah.
You have to try. It doesn't just...
Surprise!
You don't just wake up one day and all of a sudden all your money's doing exactly what you need it to do. So everyone's goals are different. Our future goals may look different than what yours do. And I once heard someone say, if you want to be successful in life, figure out what your life goals are, and then don't do anything you don't have to do that doesn't move you closer to those goals.
Yeah.
And then obviously intentionally do more things that do move you closer to those goals. And so that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about our goals because that's all we know. And we're going to share that with you. Maybe some of them overlap with yours. And then we're going to share kind of how those motivate us to try hard with money, right? Yeah. So we have 4 main goals. Number 1 is financial peace. Number 2 is to give generously. Number 3 is...
happy marriage.
Having a joyful marriage, yeah. And number 4 is enjoying life along the way. So we want to enjoy life in light of the times that we have to save extra or we don't have as much money.
Yeah.
And then also when we do have money, we don't want to put it all towards one goal like our financial peace long term and never enjoy the life we have on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah,
so there's a balance. So we'll talk about that more later. So let's jump into the first part. We are intentional with where our money goes so that we can have financial peace. So financial peace maybe looks a little different for different people. Maybe you need a certain amount of money in the bank to have financial peace. Obviously, our peace in general, we believe, comes from God. Mm-hmm. And so we should trust in Him no matter what. But that doesn't mean that we do nothing.
Yeah.
You know, we've all probably known people that are like, oh, God's in control. God's going to provide. So I'm just going to sit back on the couch and do nothing.
Do whatever I want.
Or do whatever I want, yeah. And that's not at all what we're saying. What we are saying is we want to have an emergency fund of cash or in a savings account where if something does go wrong, we've got that we've prepared and set aside, just like Proverbs talks about storing up for when things are rough, basically.
Just like, if we're going to go to the Bible, God says, any who lacks wisdom, let him ask, and it shall be given to him. So wisdom says sometimes you don't have enough. So save today for tomorrow.
Yes. Yeah, it talks about in Proverbs, like it is wise. Look at the ant because they're wise and they save up. So the emergency fund is a great way to do that. We suggest, and Dave Ramsey suggests, $1,000 as your starter emergency fund. That's not like you get there and you're done. That's the starting place before you start worrying about paying off other debt or other things that you...
Yeah. When it's a big number that once you see that saved, you feel the benefit of all the hard work you've been doing. And it makes it worth it to
it's a milestone accomplishment. Once you get there, you're like, oh, I can do this thing.
Like, I see it building.
Right. One of my favorite quotes is, emergency funds turn catastrophes into inconveniences. And that is so true. We've had plenty of what should have been catastrophes in our marriage. And fortunately, we were prepared enough financially that when they did come, we were ready and able to adapt. And yes, it still was miserable sometimes. But it could have been worse. It would have been much more stressful had we not had the money. Yeah, our house flooded. We had all kinds of issues. We had an air conditioner go out. That's a $3,000 to $5,000 repair.
Or in the car that we were about to sell for a decent price into the car for.
Yeah.
So that was a big knock.
So we've had lots of issues, but fortunately, we had an emergency fund in place and we were able to use that.
Yeah, if you don't manage your money, it will manage you.
I've heard it said another way is if you don't tell your money what to do, your money will tell you what to do. Yep. And you're constantly having to chase that money because you're not telling it what to do. In other words, you're not proactively planning where that money needs to go and making sure you have enough in each category of spending for the month.
Yeah, it's so easy to just go through the motions and not realize that money is going places, which means it's being taken away from the priority places.
So one example in a practical sense of things we don't do to ensure that we have financial peace is we avoid credit card interest. We avoid loans that are
pretty much all
like car
interest.
Loans.
Most we can help.
Yeah, you probably
a house, but
yeah. And the house is the last loan that you should pay off. A house is an okay loan because in general the value of the house is greater than the value of the loan.
Yeah.
And so if you ever get into trouble long term, if you ever get into trouble, you could liquidate the house. You sell the house, and you're able to pay off the loan with what you have left.
Yeah.
Whereas with a car loan, it's easy to get upside down where the car's worth less than what you owe on it, and that's rough. That's a not peaceful position to be in.
No.
You've probably heard the saying, more money, more problems. And I understand where that comes from, but we kind of live more by the mentality of more payments, more problems.
Yes.
And so
people you owe money to, the more your money's like managing you.
Right. Yeah, and the Bible talks about like the borrower is slave to the lender, which means, the more payments you have, the more you're going to have to always be working and making sure that you've got enough money for all these different payments.
Yep. Which is something else my dad taught me at a young age. Like, if we borrowed money, we had to pay that back. We didn't get out of it just because we borrowed money. And I mean, it really, like, learning it on at a young age really helps you put into perspective what that means of having payments to this place and that card and this card and all those things.
Right. And so in general, money is not the problem. Money management is the problem. Poor money management is the problem. Now, there's maybe 5 to 10% of cases out there where money is the problem, and maybe you need to look for a better job or more income or something in that side of the equation. But for most people, good money management can fix a lot of the problem.
It can take away a lot of that stress.
And so,
And give you the energy to focus on the other side of the equation of making more if that's necessary.
Right. And so what we're saying ultimately is if you are intentional with your money, you can achieve financial peace if that is one of your goals, and it is for us.
Yeah, and like we said, financial peace is not a number. It's not an income. It's a level at which your life is not ran from one extreme stress to another because the money management isn't intentional.
Right. Okay, so the second one is we're intentional with our money and where it goes so that we can give. As Christians, we're called to give joyfully, generously, and we try to give to the church, to missions, to people we love, gifts for people we love, and then also giving to charity or people in need.
Yeah.
We try to cover all of those. When we're making our budget, we try to set aside money for each of those different types of giving specifically. So in regards to giving, you can't help other people swim if you're drowning. And so it's hard to give what you want to give if you're not being intentional with your money. And so that's one of the reasons we try extra hard. We're real passionate about be careful where we spend and what we spend on and making sure that we have money set aside because we want to be able to give. We want to be able to help people that really need it, and we want to help the kingdom of God in all the different various ways that we try to do that. That problem of trying to help other people when you're drowning yourself, I've seen that play out. I have a friend, his mom asks for money from him all the time, but she makes a ton of money. She makes good money. But she's always trying to borrow money from him because she gives basically 100% of her money to other people and doesn't take care of herself. And I know that's an extreme, but it's a good example of not being intentional necessarily or not planning well enough so that you can take care of yourself and others.
That's one of the quotes that you said that made the biggest impact on me understanding that, because I want to give everything away and just figure it out later.
Which is great. I love that about you.
Oh, but I would be broke overnight. Like, I would not, I'm going to hoard it all or I'm going to give it all away. I can't spend it on myself. What you would always say was, you can't help everyone, so you have to be picky about who you help.
Yes. And by being picky, the people that you do help,
get the most impact.
Yeah, you can help them more so than you would if you just gave everyone $1.
Yes.
Which I know, again, extreme example, but you only have limited resources to go around.
Yeah.
And so if you're selective with who you help, you can be of more help.
Like, we invest in this, when it comes to giving in all the areas, it's more an investment in our mind.
Yes.
So it's not just throwing money here or there.
Yes. We're investing in the kingdom of God and in people.
Yes, it's effort, it's time, it's not just money. It just might look that way.
Right. And so when we do our budget, we specifically have decided we want to give to missions. We give a set amount to missions every month. We give a set amount to Tupelo Children's Mansion every year. We support Love Has Feet. We support the church.
Yeah.
We specifically and intentionally plan all of these different things when we're sitting down and making our budget every year and figuring out what we want to spend on every category. We actually sit down and talk and say, okay, how much do we need for gifts to family, and how much do we need for giving to missions, and on and on.
Yeah, and then like for random giving and loving people throughout the month, we set budgets for that.
Sure.
Like, here's a certain amount to spend for the unexpecteds.
Right. And so again, if you are intentional, if you're conscious about your spending, you can give generously.
Yeah.
And, as a kid, I always wanted to give more than I was able to.
Yeah.
We would have ministers come and visit, and I didn't have anything for that. Or I had very little, and I gave what I could. As I've gotten older and older, I'm reminded more and more of the verse that talks about, like, store up in the weeks that there isn't someone there, so that when someone does come and a minister visits you, you're able to be a blessing to them. I think it's Paul that talks about, hey, when I come, store up so I'm not a burden on you.
Which they're intentional about making a plan and putting it on their calendar to come.
Right.
And so why shouldn't we be intentional about that too?
About helping them in return, yes. Or about any of our giving.
All of it. Yeah.
Right. All right, so the next thing we want to talk about is being intentional with our money so that we have a better marriage.
Yes.
Right? We do a lot of things in our marriage. We value our marriage, our relationship, and one of those is trying to be on the same page in terms of our finances.
Yeah.
I won't go into too much detail on the hows and the what's and the hows of how we do that. But, we can say that studies show that marriage is the number one one of the top reasons for divorce is money problems.
Mm-hmm.
Money and communication
more often than not when you get down to it.
And there's, depending on what study you look at, might show, a little off. Obviously, infidelity is one of the top 3.
Money problems, pressure.
Yeah. All of that contributes.
Yeah.
And so, we plan together, we communicate about our spending. If we're going to buy something that's, we pretty much never buy anything over $100 without having talked to the other person first. And that does 2 things, really. Number one, it creates a delay between the time of you wanting something and the time that you buy it. And that's always a good thing. Yeah. Almost always a good thing. Because it gives you time to decide, do I really actually want this?
Yeah, that I need it when I'm looking right at it in the store is a lot different than when I'm at home later and realize I don't actually need it.
Mm-hmm. And then the second thing is it makes sure that we're on the same page. There's no surprises on the credit card at the end of the month. There's no...
And when he says, like, that's our limit, that's for unusual things. So, like, if we buy groceries, we just buy our normal groceries. We don't communicate about that every time.
Yes. For anything that
was communicated
outside of the budget. Normal. And when we first got married, it was probably much lower than that. We basically talked to each other about any purchase that wasn't a normal purchase, or a planned purchase, and discussed it. And sometimes we talked out, do we really want this? And sometimes the answer was yes, and we bought it. Sometimes it was no, and we didn't.
Well, and then at times, like now we have spending monies. Mm-hmm. And so we don't have to talk about it, but often we still do, just for the other person's opinion. Yeah. That's one workaround, like...
Because again, that helps us decide. Yeah. Sometimes I might think I want something, but after talking to Becca, I realize that, that doesn't line up with my life goals, like we talked about earlier. Yeah. It's not going to move me closer to my life goals. It might be something that I'm going to have to spend time and money maintaining.
Yes.
To keep as a hobby or whatever the case may be. And so we talk it out. And I think that's beneficial. And we try to value our marriage not just on the financial side, but in terms of we read marriage books together. We try to do at least one book a year.
We go to marriage conferences.
We really try to put an emphasis on that because divorce is at an all-time high. And that's one area that married people are attacked the most is their marriage and their walk with God. So we really try to put a focus on that. So again, that motivates us, our marriage motivates us to be intentional with our money and be conscious about how we spend.
And also, kind of going back to financial peace, since our marriage is such a priority, we focus on the money because peace in that area helps our marriage.
True. Yeah. All right. So lastly, we are intentional with our money because we want to enjoy life.
Yes.
Earlier I said along the way, but we want to enjoy life in general on a day-to-day basis. It's important to point out that enjoying life on a day-to-day basis
looks more like contentment and a lot less like everything you want.
Right. What I was going to say is it doesn't require money.
Yeah.
Because if you practice contentment and creativity, you can learn to enjoy a lot of things in life without spending any money.
Yeah.
Not that you shouldn't. We try to set money aside in our budget so that we can have guilt-free spending money, that we can spend on our hobbies or things that we just want.
Yeah.
Whatever the case may be, maybe we want to go on vacation. So we try to set aside and plan for that. Sometimes it means not buying things that don't spark joy. I've bought things that I wish I didn't buy, and I had to sell them and get rid of them because it didn't work for me. It didn't bring me the joy that I thought it was going to bring. I didn't get to use it as often as I wanted to use it, for example, or whatever the case may be. I'm sure we've all bought something that we regretted after the fact.
Yeah. Like your boat.
Like the boat. Yeah. That was what I was thinking of.
Okay.
For me, a boat was not a good purchase. Whenever I looked at it, I just felt bad about not getting to use it more so than anything. It wasn't that I wanted to use it. It was that I felt bad that I didn't use it.
Oh, yeah?
Like, does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
I've got all this money invested and this time and I got it all ready to go, and then didn't ever use it nearly as much as I wanted. And so then the average cost of a fishing trip was hundreds of dollars because I was only using it every so often. Yep. And there's so many maintenance costs and insurance costs and all of that
fishing
goes
trip
along
took
with it.
way longer.
Sure. And so ultimately it just wasn't worth it to me. It didn't bring me joy. It didn't bring value to my life. If anything, it just brought more stress to my life. And so we cut it out. And so that's the solution sometimes is if you want to enjoy life along the way, sometimes you have to cut out some things that you thought you wanted. Sometimes you have to delay things that you want.
Yep.
And that way you could pay cash for them. And
you're
now
not
it's
saying,
guilt-free. You don't have to worry about it.
Yeah. You're not saying no to the item now. You're saying yes to the priority later.
Mm-hmm. So we talked about our 4 goals: financial peace, generous giving, joyful marriage, and enjoying life along the way. And everybody's got different goals. So many people, though, they might even know what their goals are, but they accidentally spend all their money either on 1 or 2 of those goals and don't save enough for the other goals, or maybe they spend all their money on frivolous things that aren't even related to the goals at all. And then obviously some people don't even know what their goals are, financially or for their life or whatever. And if that's...
Some people don't even know that they're allowed to sit and really think that out.
Right. And so if that's you, we would challenge you to take 10 minutes alone, maybe 30 minutes alone, maybe go out and eat by yourself, or if you're married, go with your spouse, and just dream about what do we want our financial future to look like.
Yeah.
And figure out what those goals are. And once you have your goals in place and you have that why in place of here's why we want to save money, here's why we want to spend only in certain categories or whatever, it makes the actual doing of it a lot easier. It makes being intentional easier because you have a good motivator now.
Yeah.
You have a goal driving you to do those things. Mm-hmm. And so we're definitely intentional with our money because we want to have enough to do the fun things in life. And you have to balance all of these goals. If we just save for the fun things, then we're not going to have the financial peace that we want because we're not going to be able to retire or,
fix the car.
Fix the car because we spent it all on the fun things today or whatever the case may be. And so you have to balance them. You have to figure out between you and your spouse, or if it's just you, what are my values? What are my goals? And let that drive your actions.
Yeah.
So think about that. Think about what are some areas you can be more intentional in your spending or in your saving. Feel free to comment and post those if you're watching online. And thank you so much for joining our show. Hope you enjoyed it.